The Art Center inspires creativity and contributes to
community well-being
through equitable access to
and engagement with visual arts.
We collaborate to offer exhibitions,
learning opportunities, artist development,
and cultural events centered on
art, artists, and art enthusiasts in the greater Corvallis area.
Welcome, everyone. This is Jenny Castle with the Art Center in Corvallis, Oregon. I'm here today with Sabra Comins, who is an artist in our Evolution of Practice exhibition in the main gallery, which opens April 6th. Sabra is part of this show because she finished the Artist Accelerator Program back in 2020, and her practice has evolved since then. And she's here to talk to us today a little bit about that process. Welcome, Sabra.
Thank you, Jenny.
I would love to just hear a little bit about how your work has changed since the residency ended. We were talking a little bit earlier about how it was a pretty tumultuous time to be finishing a program like that and then trying to continue to make. So can you tell me a little bit about that experience of finishing a structured program and then moving into your own studio practice?
So the finishing of the program coincided with the shutdown with COVID. And so it was kind of a transition, not just in the practice and artwork, but also in my life and most everybody's life at the time. So it was a very confusing time after finishing the program, which I thoroughly enjoyed and felt focused and supported, and then going to this place of isolation where I have to stay confined in my home was it was very challenging. And I did commit to writing a lot of letters and also just spending time daily with my notebooks and journals and also trying to be outside as much as I could. So that's what I was doing individually. And then my family, it was kind of, we're having to navigate a lot of new systems, doing Zoom school and from a teaching point of view and also a learning point of view. And about 2 weeks into the pandemic, our dog became paralyzed. And so he was dragging himself down the hall, and that required several months of rehab where we wheelbarrowed him around in a harness, and he got acupuncture. And I actually had a great relationship with the veterinarian because that was one of my only social outlets. So that was kind of how it started, and how do you think those experiences shaped your practice in the years since then? I mean, these were very I think influential years to most people. I think people's view of the world and their relationship to other people shifted a lot, and their relationship to the natural world shifted a lot. And how do you express those types of things in your artistic practice, those life experiences? I think that I have really been always sensitive to my feelings, and that they became even more prominent during this time. And I think that I'm realizing just lately that that's a great catalyst for doing work, and that for a while it was more of a management kind of thing of what do I do with all this angst or this learning about hatred or violence or fear or whatever that's happening in the world. And now I feel like it's more helpful to me, and it gives me, and I know how to work with it, I guess. And I've spent a lot of time looking at how things are working around me, and if that's with people or animals, landscapes, and I'm trying to pull those things in as well. What was really hard during the early part of the pandemic was not having enough people around. Zoom doesn't work really for that for me. So that was hard.
Yeah. So you're using your artwork as a way to process the emotions and thoughts that you're having. Can you talk a little bit more about that process and kind of share the importance of that or things that you've learned by working that way?
Yeah, so when I can't manage what's happening and I feel overwhelmed or shut down because there's too much going on, that's when I turn to art and writing. And what it allows me to do is to kind of shut off my brain. And that's where I can tap into more of a core sense of myself, where ideas and images and feelings and like they come out, and it's an invitation for them to be expressed. And I don't necessarily know how they're going to come out, and I think that's a good thing. And it takes a lot of patience and support in order to trust yourself to doing that. And I'm still working with that.
Yeah, we were speaking earlier before we started recording about my struggles with starting a project, like kind of overthinking things before something even starts. And it sounds like those years, either, if we wanted to define it as the years after your residency or the years of isolation through a pandemic, helped you evolve into an artist that has less fear about just kind of starting and just getting something out of your body and onto the paper.
Yeah, and I think even preparing for this show, I was thinking of lots of ideas and grand schemes and whatnot, and usually talking myself out of them, as we talked about earlier too. That and then at some point I realized. I heard in my mind, it doesn't have to be the one. And so it kind of took all this pressure off of whatever I was going to make. It does not have to be the one, the masterpiece, and if that's even never going to come. But so that took a lot of pressure off. And also I heard from my family, it's just got to come from you, Sabe. Mm-hmm. And so that was the support. And those two things together, I felt like, oh yeah, I'm just going to begin.
That's wonderful. And to get into those types of mind spaces and to get into a flow like that can be really difficult. And I'm really glad that you found that rhythm. I'd love to ask about, so I think it's really interesting. The impulse of making is so connected to the emotions that you feel and like the things that you feel like you need to get out. How do you feel about the finished product and what it's reflecting back to people? Do you does that correlate? Does it sometimes feel completely disembodied, or do you think it correlates in some way to the viewer, what you were trying to express?
I think that I've spent a lot of time in my life too focused on what other people are thinking. And so I consider the end, what people think about the end product is not really any of my business. And if I can maintain that belief through this, then that is really helpful. I also feel like I need to be kind of, I don't know if it's entertained or I definitely need to have something that I like about it in order to feel good about sending it on. And that might be just be in a title, or maybe it's a memory of making it, or feeling like there's some small little clever part that can be enough.
Yeah, I think being able to see yourself in it, right? Like those little clever parts that only you could have come up with, because you're an individual person who is like expressing this individuality in the work. I think that's really important and something that artists struggle with who are showing work to the public, right? Like you want to please others a lot of the time, and then you can lose some of these precious moments that are really important to you. How like I love hearing about your process of getting ready for this show. And we spoke earlier about how you're actually making a piece that reflects the title of the show, Evolution of Practice. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the idea came to be and your hopes for that piece in a couple of weeks? Are you still making it or is it done?
I am still making it.
Okay. Still evolving.
It is still evolving.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that as much as I am based in the feelings around art, I also am a fairly literal person. And so I like the title of this show, and I wanted to do something that reflected that. And so I am using pieces of art that I've made over the last few years, and also just maybe mediums that I just experimented with, and kind of putting those together in a sculptural piece that's showing a non-linear progression of through these last few years.
That's great. So we were talking too, like there's the emotional side of like kind of fleshing out how you feel about what's happening in the world. But I love something that you said earlier about how like life has to be in the art. You have to keep experiencing life in order for the art to come through versus just kind of being in a bubble of creating without having these experiences. And it seems like this piece, because you're reflecting over several years of things that you've experimented with or things that you've made, you're reflecting back on these memories and back on this life. Can you talk a little bit is that true? Am I reading too much into that, or can you talk a little bit about that?
No, excuse me. That is true. And I also I just get interested in a lot of different things, and sometimes it's maybe talking myself out of completing a piece by starting something new. But there have been several experiences that I think overall are helping me to evolve in my life. But, having to do some caretaking when my mom had a major surgery and my son really struggling through Zoom school and just a lot of, and some other things where there was a lot of tension in my house, and learning, I learned I'm not a caretaker, and my son's a kinesthetic learner, and that doesn't work with the Zoom school. And so just seeing roles for myself and roles that other people are being asked to play, and how they may or may not fit into the system very well. And so that causes me to look more closely at myself and where I've come from, and what my, a lot of my family of origin experiences are that shape how I act and think and feel today.
Yeah, and going through hard times like that, where you don't feel like you're successful, like you said, like I was asked to be a caretaker, and I don't feel like I embody that very easily, and so not meeting a personal expectation or feeling a sense of failure because something was really hard. It can be a really interesting motivator to make work, and it can actually help you release fear connected to something that feels way less important, right? Than like your family relationships.
Right.
So it can almost make you courageous in a way.
Right. I think courageous probably when you have good support. But I felt like I did the caretaking fine, except I didn't take care of myself during it. And so I ended up totally depleted and, and angry at myself for not being able to manage my own needs during that time, and probably having expectations that were not realistic. It's a lot of work. And especially it's a lot of work if there's, some emotional history that contributes to it.
That complicates things.
Yeah.
So you had a dog, family, all relying on you in this really stressful time in the world's existence. And you learned some really important things about yourself, and now it's coming out in your work. That's incredibly exciting.
It does feel exciting
now, right? Like you went through all these hard things, and then you're coming out the other side wiser and stronger, it sounds like.
I hope. There's also a change, a transition in my life right now as my son graduates from high school, and he's been a large focus for the last 18 years, and so there's kind of a now what question that comes up, and having this show is, it helps to answer some of that and point me in the direction that I want to be going.
That's really exciting. Well, thank you for joining us today. And thank you, listener, for listening. The show will open on April 6th and will be up through May 13th. So I hope you have a chance to come by the Art Center and see Sabra's work in person. Thank you for listening to TAC Makes. This is a new creative project at the Art Center, and I hope you enjoy our learning curve as much as we do. You can find more episodes on YouTube and Spotify and on our website, theartscenter.net. That's arts with an S.